On that cool September morning, nothing foretold trouble. The Pacific Ocean fully justified its name, its surface smooth as glass. The sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon, painting the sky in gentle shades of pink. James Warren, as usual, was preparing his gear on the deck of the research vessel Marine Wanderer *. His team, consisting of 5 experienced divers, was methodically checking the equipment. Sarah Chen, a marine biology specialist, was adjusting her underwater camera. Mike Peterson, a former military diver, was inspecting the air tanks. Rachel O'Neill, a marine ecologist, was calibrating instruments to measure water temperature and salinity. Thomas Rodriguez, a navigation expert, was studying current maps on his tablet. James checked the weather forecast on his smartphone for the 100th time. The conditions were perfect for diving: light wind, good visibility, and calm seas. Early in the morning, the team began the standard communication checks. Sarah pulled out her worn observation journal, ready to record data on marine life. These waters were often home to sea lions, dolphins, and of course, majestic humpback whales. Within 15 minutes, the first group of divers, James and Mike, descended into the water. The temperature was slightly lower than usual. Their plan was to explore a small coral reef about a mile from the shore. This reef was part of their long-term project monitoring the marine ecosystem. Rachel and Thomas remained aboard, ready to assist their colleagues at a moment's notice. Sarah, observing the water's surface with binoculars, noticed unusual movement about 300 meters from the ship. At first, she thought it was the usual spray from a whale's blowhole, but something about it seemed strange. She immediately reported this to Captain McPherson. George, with 40 years of seafaring experience, sensed something was amiss. He steered the ship toward the disturbance while maintaining a safe distance. Rachel quickly grabbed a special hydrophone to record underwater sounds. A few minutes later, they saw a massive humpback whale whose behavior was clearly out of the ordinary. Instead of the smooth, graceful movements typical of these ocean giants, the whale was jerking as if something was obstructing it. Its breathing appeared rapid and uneven. Sarah immediately contacted James and Mike via the underwater radio. The divers stopped their routine work and carefully headed toward the whale's location. They understood the risks of approaching a potentially distressed animal of such size. Meanwhile, on board the ship, Rachel began preparing rescue equipment. Thomas contacted the Coast Guard to report the situation and request support. When James and Mike reached the whale, their hearts sank. Before them was a magnificent creature entangled in a complex web of fishing nets, ropes, and chains. A massive anchor, caught in the nets, was slowly pulling the animal down. James carefully approached the whale's head, trying to stay within its line of sight. Mike stayed slightly behind, ready to assist at any moment. When their eyes met, James felt a chill run down his spine. In the whale's enormous eyes, he saw not only pain, but also a clear plea for help. The animal slightly turned its head, as if trying to get a better look at the strange being in front of it. James slowly raised his hand, showing the whale his empty palm, a gesture he often used when working with dolphins. To his surprise, the whale remained still, moving its fins only slightly to maintain its position in the water. 20 minutes later, the second team of divers, Sarah and Rachel, arrived at the scene with additional equipment. They began systematically photographing the tangled gear to better understand the structure of this deadly trap. The first priority was identifying the most dangerous areas of entanglement. Using a high-resolution underwater camera, Sarah documented every knot and tangle. James began working on freeing the tail fin, the most hazardous part of the operation. However, the whale seemed to understand the importance of what was happening and tried to keep its tail as still as possible. Fortunately, the Coast Guard vessel arrived soon after. On board was a marine mammal veterinarian, Dr. Emily Parker, along with an additional rescue team. They immediately deployed specialized equipment for lifting heavy objects. Dr. Parker dove into the water to assess the whale's condition. she found several deep wounds where the ropes had cut into the whale's skin. Luckily, none were life-threatening. Each rescuer was assigned a specific task. The most challenging part was removing the ropes from the whale's mouth. James, the most experienced member of the team, took on this task. He slowly approached the whale's head, speaking softly to it through his diving regulator. Air bubbles rose around him, creating a surreal dance in the sunlight. The whale seemed to understand his intentions. It slightly opened its mouth, allowing James to examine the tangled gear inside. Inside, he found several thick ropes wrapped around the whale's tongue and palate, explaining why the animal had difficulty feeding. Removing the ropes from the mouth took nearly an hour. Throughout this time, the whale remained remarkably calm, occasionally moving its tongue to help James access the most challenging spots. Each successfully removed piece of rope brought visible relief to the animal. They still needed to free most of the whale's body and deal with the anchor. An hour later, most of the nets were removed from the whale's body. The wounds left behind appeared inflamed but not critical. Dr. Parker periodically checked the whale's condition, noting that its breathing had become more steady and calm. All that remained was to cut the last ropes tying the anchor to the whale. When the moment came, James signaled everyone to take their positions. Mike began carefully cutting the final ropes while the others controlled the anchor's movement. The whale, as if sensing the importance of the moment, remained almost motionless. When the last rope was cut, the anchor slowly descended, controlled by the pontoons and safety lines. The team held their breath as the massive structure gradually disappeared into the ocean depths. Once the anchor was detached, the whale's behavior changed noticeably. For the first time in hours, it could move freely. Its initial movements were cautious, as if it were relearning how to swim. The team spent the next half hour observing the whale and documenting its condition. The animal began making slow circles around the rescuers, moving more freely and naturally with each pass. Its breathing had completely normalized. Then, something extraordinary happened. The whale unexpectedly approached James and very gently brushed against him with its massive body. The gesture was so delicate and intentional, it seemed almost surreal. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it left an indelible impression on everyone present. Afterward, the whale performed a series of graceful movements, resembling figure eights. The team gradually began to distance themselves from the whale, giving it more space to explore its newfound freedom. Dr. Parker conducted a final assessment from a distance, noting that despite the numerous wounds and scars, the whale's overall condition appeared satisfactory. Then the whale unexpectedly surfaced and released a powerful spout of water from its blowhole. This spray was far stronger than usual, as if the animal was expressing its joy and relief. Typically, whales try to leave the scene of such a stressful event as quickly as possible. But this whale seemed intent on expressing its gratitude. Eventually, the whale slowly swam past the ship, allowing every team member a close look. By evening, the whale began heading north at a slow but steady pace. Its movements were confident and deliberate. The next morning, the team gathered at their organization's office to compile a detailed report. They carefully described all the methods and techniques used, knowing this experience could benefit other rescue teams. James particularly highlighted the whale's remarkable calmness and willingness to accept human help. In his 20 years of working at sea, he had never encountered such a level of mutual understanding between a human and a marine giant. Mike conducted a thorough analysis of the recovered fishing gear. Based on the markings on the nets and anchor, they determined they belonged to a fishing vessel that had sunk in the area during a storm a few months earlier. A week after the rescue, a research vessel 50 miles north reported sighting a humpback whale with distinctive scars. Its behavior was completely normal. It was actively feeding and interacting with other whales. The story of this rescue quickly spread through the professional community. This story became a vivid example of how professionalism, patience, and the right approach could lead to the successful resolution of even the most challenging situations in the ocean. Each team member took away something significant from this experience. Even after much time had passed, all participants in that rescue operation still remembered the whale's gaze with a special sense of awe, a gaze of a sentient being aware of what was happening and capable of expressing gratitude to its rescuers.